When my boss looked me in the eye and told me my white, underqualified sister-in-law was getting the vice president title I had spent 7 years bleeding for, he fully expected me to break down. He expected me to cry, beg, or dutifully offer to train her. Instead, I gave him a warm, steady smile, walked out to my car, and quietly drove home. A day later, my phone was completely frozen by the weight of 85 frantic missed calls. My name is Zuri. I am 35 years old, and if you have ever been the unappreciated workhorse for a family or a company that demanded your brilliance but denied you your crown, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe because you are going to want to hear exactly how I brought an entire corporate empire to its knees without raising my voice once. The morning of the ultimate betrayal started like any other Tuesday at Apex Logistics. I arrived at the corporate park in Atlanta before the sun was even fully up. For 7 long years, I had been the senior director of operations. But a title is just a word on a business card. In reality, I was the spine, the nervous system, and the beating heart of the entire company. When I first joined Apex, it was a struggling regional delivery service, drowning in overhead costs and inefficient supply chains. I spent my weekends, my holidays, and countless sleepless nights building our proprietary vendor routing system from scratch. I coded the algorithms, negotiated the vendor contracts, and single-handedly streamlined a process that saved the company millions of dollars every quarter. I had been doing the job of a vice president for 3 solid years, carrying the weight of executive decisions on a director's salary. Today was the day that was supposed to change. We were finalizing a massive merger with a European logistics conglomerate, a deal that was entirely built on the back of the routing infrastructure I had created. Calvin, our chief executive officer, had called me into his office for an early morning meeting. I walked into his plush, glass-walled corner office, feeling a sense of deep, hard-earned pride. The skyline of Atlanta stretched out behind his mahogany desk, bathed in the golden light of the morning. I took my seat in the expensive leather chair across from him, smoothing down my tailored blazer. I had dressed meticulously for this moment, knowing that as a dark-skinned African-American woman in corporate America, I always had to look twice as sharp just to be seen as professional. Calvin, an older African-American man in his late 50s, sat across from me. You would think that sharing our cultural background would mean he understood the hurdles I had jumped over to build his empire, but Calvin was a man obsessed with proximity to traditional corporate power. He loved country clubs, golf courses, and the kind of networking that usually excluded people who looked like us. Still, I respected him, and I trusted that my undeniable results would speak louder than company politics. Zuri, he started steepling his fingers together as he leaned back in his chair. You have been an absolute force of nature for Apex Logistics. I look at our quarterly earnings and I see your fingerprints on every single successful metric. We literally could not have secured this European merger without your relentless dedication. I smiled, feeling a rush of validation. Thank you, Calvin. It has been a long journey, but I am ready for this next step. I have already drafted the integration strategies for the overseas vendors. He offered a tight, practiced smile and slid a heavy navy blue leather folder across the desk toward me. I reached out and opened it, my heart pounding with anticipation of seeing my new vice president contract the compensation package, the equity shares I had earned. I flipped open the cover. It was a certificate, a beautifully embossed piece of heavy cardstock that read, Certificate of Excellence presented to Zuri for outstanding operational support. There was no contract. There was no promotion. There was a $50 gift card to a local steakhouse tucked behind the certificate. I stared at the piece of paper, the words blurring together as the air was sucked out of the room. A gift card. 7 years of my life. 80-hour work weeks, missed birthdays, canceled vacations, and the entire technological foundation of his company reduced to a piece of paper and a dinner voucher. I slowly looked up from the folder, my expression completely neutral, though my blood was beginning to roar in my ears. Calvin cleared his throat, suddenly looking everywhere but directly into my eyes. The board and I had a very long discussion about the new executive structure following the European merger. He said, his voice taking on that smooth corporate tone he used when he was about to deliver terrible news. "You are our most valuable player, Zuri. You are a relentless workhorse. But moving into the international market requires a very specific executive presence." I sat perfectly still, my hands resting in my lap. Executive presence. I repeated, my voice steady and quiet. "Yes," he continued, gaining confidence now that I was not yelling. "The European investors are traditional. They are looking for a certain synergy in the C-suite, a specific aesthetic and cultural fit that aligns with their corporate networking style. We need a face for the company that speaks their language, someone who can navigate the golf course meetings and the high society galas." He was using every corporate buzzword in the dictionary to say exactly what I knew he meant. I was good enough to do the heavy lifting in the shadows. I was good enough to be the mule that pulled the cart. But I was too black, too outspoken, and too focused on actual work to be the shiny, polished face he wanted to parade in front of his wealthy white investors. "So who is taking the vice president role, Calvin?" I asked, the words clipping the silence of the room. "If I am the one running the operations, who exactly is going to be my boss?" Calvin shifted uncomfortably, adjusting his expensive silk tie. "We have decided to promote Lauren to the Vice President of International Operations." For a fraction of a second, the carefully maintained mask on my face almost slipped. Lauren. My 29-year-old, aggressively mediocre, perpetually confused white sister-in-law. The same Lauren who had married my older brother Malik. The same Lauren whose parents had paid for her useless online Master of Business Administration degree. The same Lauren that I had personally begged Calvin to hire as a junior coordinator just 8 months ago because my brother was crying about being broke. "Lauren," I said, making sure he heard the utter disbelief in my tone. "The junior coordinator who does not know how to log into the master routing matrix without calling the IT department. The woman who has been here for 8 months. Calvin leaned forward, attempting a tone of patronizing camaraderie. "Zuri, be reasonable. Lauren has her Master of Business Administration. She comes from a very prominent family with extensive connections in the international shipping space. Her father plays golf with the lead investor on the European board. She has the exact soft skills and networking aesthetic we need to close this deal." He paused, offering me an encouraging, sickening smile. "But we know she does not have your technical expertise. That is why we are giving you a 10% raise. We need you to stay exactly where you are, managing the back end, keeping the engines running, and assisting Lauren as she transitions into the executive role. She will be the face of the operation, and you will be her trusted advisor. It is a perfect partnership." I looked at Calvin, really looked at him, and saw a man so desperate for validation from the elite circles he wanted to enter that he was willing to sacrifice his best asset to appease them. He expected me to swallow my pride, accept a pitiful raise, and spend the next 5 years holding my sister-in-law's hand while she took the credit and the salary for my genius. He expected the strong black woman to carry the emotional and intellectual labor of the fragile, unqualified white woman, because that was the dynamic society had always rewarded. I slowly reached down into my designer tote bag sitting on the floor next to my chair. Inside that bag, nestled between my planner and my makeup bag, was a crisp, professionally printed letter. It was a 4-week transition notice. 2 weeks ago, the largest competing logistics firm in the country had quietly headhunted me, offering me an executive vice president role with a signing bonus that made my head spin. I had printed the notice this morning, fully intending to hand it to Calvin, decline his counteroffer, and spend the next month gracefully transitioning my routing software over to his IT team so his company would not sink when I left. I had planned to do the honorable, professional thing. My fingers brushed against the heavy textured paper of the envelope. As Calvin continued to talk about synergy and teamwork and how Lauren was going to lean on my operational wisdom, I closed my hand around the envelope inside my bag. I gripped the paper tightly, and without taking my eyes off Calvin, I silently tore the letter cleanly in half. Then I tore it again. I did not need a 4-week transition. They did not deserve a graceful exit. They did not deserve my protection, my honor, or the technological masterpiece I had built for them. I slowly pulled my empty hand out of my bag and rested it on the desk. I looked at the $50 steakhouse gift card sitting on top of my certificate of excellence. I felt a profound, chilling sense of peace wash over my entire body. The anger evaporated, replaced by a cold, calculating clarity. Calvin had absolutely no idea that he had just handed the keys to his kingdom to a woman who did not even know how to start the car, while actively insulting the mechanic who built the engine. "Calvin," I said, my voice dripping with honeyed warmth, "I completely understand. You have to do what is best for the corporate aesthetic. Lauren is incredibly fortunate to have this opportunity, and I am sure she is going to bring a very unique perspective to the executive team." Calvin exhaled a massive sigh of relief, his shoulders dropping as he leaned back in his chair. "I knew you would understand, Zuri. You have always been the most rational person in this building. I will have HR send over the paperwork for your 10% raise this afternoon. We are going to do great things together." I stood up, smoothing my blazer one last time. I left the leather folder, the certificate, and the insulting gift card sitting right in the middle of his desk. "Oh, I know, great things are coming," I said, flashing him a brilliant, flawless smile. "Have a wonderful morning, Calvin." I turned on my heel and walked out of his office, my stride steady and powerful. I did not storm down the hallway. I did not slam his door. I walked back to my department with my head held high, knowing that by the end of this day, Apex Logistics was going to experience a catastrophic failure of their own making, and I was going to enjoy every single second of the fallout. I did not go back to my desk. I bypassed my operational department entirely and walked straight to the executive parking garage. The click of my heels against the polished concrete floor echoed in the quiet, cavernous space. When I reached my car and pulled the heavy door shut, the absolute silence of the interior enveloped me. It was the kind of total quiet you only truly appreciate when your entire existence has been a chaotic symphony of other people demanding pieces of you. I rested my hands on the leather steering wheel, taking a long, deep breath. The air in my lungs felt different. It felt clean. For the first time in 7 years, I was not thinking about supply chain logistics, vendor matrices, or how to save Calvin from his own terrible business decisions. I was finally thinking about myself. Before I could even put the key in the ignition, the digital display on my dashboard lit up. A text message notification chimed through the car speakers. Then another. Then a third. The rapid-fire succession of messages was a signature move of my older brother Malik. I tapped the screen to read the preview. "Yo, Zuri. Why did the platinum card decline at the clubhouse? Lauren and I are sitting here with the membership director, and it is highly embarrassing. Transfer some funds right now. I need this cleared before our lunch reservation." I sat back in my seat and let out a dry, humorless laugh. The sheer audacity of the message hung in the air, a perfect, glittering reflection of my family's deeply toxic dynamic. Malik is 37 years old, but you would never know it by looking at his financial independence or his level of maturity. He is the undisputed golden child of our family. Growing up, my mother Valerie treated him like a young king who was simply waiting for his inevitable coronation. While I was pulling all-nighters in college, maintaining a perfect grade point average to keep my scholarships. Malik was dropping out of different degree programs to pursue his passions. When I started my first grueling corporate job, Malik was on his fourth entrepreneurial venture that produced zero revenue and endless debt. And whenever those ventures inevitably failed, Valerie would call me. She had mastered the art of weaponizing guilt-wrapping financial extortion in the guise of cultural solidarity. She would tell me that I was blessed, that the universe had given me a strong mind and a good job specifically so I could uplift my family. She constantly reminded me that Malik was a black man trying to find his way in a hard world, and that as his sister, it was my sacred duty to support him. She conditioned me to believe that my worth was tied directly to my utility. I was the cash cow. Malik was the prince. The American Express card he was currently holding hostage at a luxury golf club was originally meant for emergencies. I gave it to him over a year ago when he called me practically in tears, claiming he could not afford groceries because his car needed a new transmission. I was paying his rent at the time, and the thought of my brother going hungry broke my heart. But the definition of groceries somehow morphed over the months. It turned into $1,000 steakhouse dinners, luxury car leases, designer clothes for his wife, and now apparently a country club initiation fee. The connection struck me with the force of a physical blow. Lauren. The very same Lauren who had just sat in Calvin's office and happily accepted the vice president title that I had bled for. She was currently sitting in a country club lobby celebrating her stolen promotion by dragging my brother to sign up for a luxury membership, fully intending to use my credit card to pay for it. They were quite literally trying to make me finance the celebration of my own professional disrespect. My brother was demanding that I open my wallet to subsidize the fragile ego of a woman who was actively trying to destroy my career. Normally, this is the exact part of the day where my chest would tighten with severe anxiety. Normally, I would feel the crushing weight of family obligation bearing down on my shoulders. I would log into my banking application, quietly transfer $5,000 from my hard-earned savings to the credit account, and send an apologetic text to my brother, promising that the card would work if they swiped it again. I would do it to keep the peace. I would do it to avoid the inevitable screaming phone call from my mother, accusing me of humiliating her golden boy in front of his refined white wife. I had spent my entire adult life acting as the financial and emotional shock absorber for my family's incompetence. But today was different. The woman who walked into the Apex Logistics building this morning was a dedicated, loyal workhorse who believed that hard work would eventually be rewarded. The woman sitting in the car right now was a completely different entity. The invisible strings that had puppeted my life, tying me to my toxic boss and my parasitic family, had just been severed by a pair of corporate scissors. I was suddenly unbound, and my family was about to realize that gravity is highly unforgiving when the strings are finally cut. I stared at the dashboard screen as another message popped up from Malik. "Zuri, answer me. Lauren is getting very upset. This is supposed to be a big day for her. Fix the card." A big day for her. The words cemented my resolve. I did not type a response. I did not transfer a single dime. I reached out, tapped the screen, and placed Malik's contact on Do Not Disturb. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking application, and permanently deactivated the American Express card. I put the car in drive and pulled out of the parking garage, leaving my older brother and his newly promoted wife to sit in an upscale lobby and figure out how to pay their own bills for the very first time in their lives. The drive home is quiet, but my mind is loud, replaying the decades of conditioning that led me to this exact breaking point. Deactivating that credit card was just a symptom of treating a much deeper disease. That disease is my mother, Valerie. To understand how my own brother could sit in a country club and demand I finance his wife's stolen promotion, you have to understand the woman who raised us. Valerie is a woman who wears her deep-seated insecurities like a Sunday church hat, oversized, loud, and desperately seeking validation. For my entire life, she has been obsessed with status appearances and proximity to whatever she deems as high society. When Malik brought Lauren home, Valerie did not just welcome a daughter-in-law into the family. She welcomed an acquisition of social capital. Lauren is white, comes from a family with a generational wealth aesthetic, and possesses a business degree that her parents fully funded, but she has never successfully used. To Valerie, having Lauren sit at her dining table elevates her own image. She parades Lauren around the church congregation like a pristine trophy, constantly using words like refined, delicate, and elegant to describe a woman who does the absolute bare minimum. Valerie is completely blind to the internalized bias she projects onto her own dark-skinned, outspoken, hardworking daughter. The memory of our last Thanksgiving dinner hits me as I navigate the heavy Atlanta traffic, the injustice of it burning fresh in my chest. We hosted the dinner at Valerie's house. I say Valerie's house, But my name is the only one on the deed. I paid the down payment. I pay the monthly mortgage. I had even paid for the catered turkey, the extravagant floral centerpieces, and the premium wine flowing into everyone's glasses. Yet while the rest of the family lounged in the formal living room laughing and drinking, I was the one in the kitchen sweating over the stove to make sure the food was plated perfectly. Lauren was sitting gracefully at the head of the table, sipping a Chardonnay and complaining about how exhausting the current job market was for someone of her caliber. I walked into the dining room, carrying a heavy porcelain serving dish, my phone buzzing incessantly in my pocket with a logistics emergency I was managing remotely for Apex. I set the dish down on the table, offering a quick apology for being distracted by work. That was all the invitation my mother needed. Valerie looked at me, her eyes sweeping over my practical clothes and tired expression, then looked affectionately at Lauren's perfectly manicured posture. She took a sip of her wine and delivered a line designed to cut me down to size in front of the entire extended family. "Zuri works like a mule," Valerie announced, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings I paid for. "That is exactly why she does not have a ring on her finger. Men do not want a workhorse, Zuri. They want a woman with grace. You need to learn how to soften up to be a place of peace. Just look at Lauren. She knows how to let a man lead." The table erupted in polite, uncomfortable chuckles. Malik smirked, cutting into his turkey with a look of supreme satisfaction. Lauren offered me a performative, pitying smile, reaching across the table to affectionately pat my mother's hand. Nobody defended me. Nobody pointed out the glaring, humiliating irony of the situation. Grace. That was the word my mother used. But Grace does not pay the mortgage on a 5-bedroom suburban house. Grace did not cover the down payment on Malik's leased Mercedes. Grace did not pay for the very food they were chewing, the wine they were drinking, or the electricity keeping the chandelier above their heads glowing. I did. My 80-hour work weeks did. My calloused hands, my brilliant mind, and my relentless drive kept the entire family afloat. But to my mother, my financial provider status was just an expectation. It was a duty I owed them for the privilege of being part of the family. It earned me absolutely zero respect. It only earned me the title of the family mule. I swallowed that insult at Thanksgiving because I was conditioned to believe that disrespect was just the tax I had to pay for family unity. I forced a smile, went back into the kitchen, and kept serving them. I protected my mother's fragile ego at the total expense of my own dignity. I allowed them to feast on the fruits of my labor while they actively mocked the dirt on my hands. But as I grip the steering wheel today, turning onto my street, the memory does not make me feel small anymore. It does not make me want to cry or seek their elusive approval. It fuels the cold, brilliant fire burning in my chest. I am not a mule. I am the owner of the farm, and as of this exact moment, the farm is officially closing its doors to unpaying guests. I pull into my driveway, the engine of my car humming a steady rhythm that matches the calculated beat of my heart. Looking at the beautiful brick exterior of my home, my mind drifts back to exactly how the parasite breached the host. 8 months ago, Malik was drowning. His latest entrepreneurial disaster, a luxury sneaker consignment business that existed entirely on Instagram, had spectacularly imploded. The creditors were calling the lease on his imported car was past due, and the reality of providing for his wife was finally knocking on his front door. True to form, he did not look for a job. He called our mother crying. Valerie immediately deployed her favorite weapon. She summoned me to her house, sat me down, and painted a picture of absolute desperation. She told me Malik's blood pressure was dangerously high, and that his marriage was on the rocks because Lauren felt financially insecure. Then came the ultimate guilt trip. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "Zuri Loren has that expensive Master of Business Administration degree. She just needs a foot in the door to prove herself. You have so much power at that company. You sit right next to the chief executive officer. Do this for your brother, save his marriage." I knew it was a mistake the moment the words left her mouth, but the conditioning ran too deep. I capitulated. The very next morning, I walked into Calvin's office and cashed in years of my own hard-earned political capital. I convinced him to create a junior logistics coordinator position specifically tailored for Lauren. I vouched for her. I put my own flawless professional reputation on the line to give my brother's wife a highly coveted corporate salary. That was my fatal error. I thought I was throwing a life preserver to a drowning family member. I did not realize I was rolling a Trojan horse directly into my own sanctuary. Lauren walked into Apex Logistics acting as if her name was already on the building. She did not view me as her supervisor, her mentor, or her savior. She viewed me as her personal corporate concierge. I vividly remember the Wednesday of her very first week. I had handed her a foundational assignment. It was a basic data entry task requiring her to update international vendor compliance codes. It was tedious entry-level work, but it was absolutely essential for understanding the architecture of our supply chain software. It was the exact same grunt work I had mastered years ago to build the department. 2 hours after I gave her the assignment, Lauren strolled into my office unannounced. She dropped the physical files back onto my desk, let out a dramatic, breathy sigh, and offered me a condescending smile. "Zuri," she chirped, "the user interface on this software is just incredibly clunky. It does not align with the modern workflow models I studied in grad school. I really think it makes more sense for you to handle the manual data input while I focus my energy on big-picture synergy and high-level strategy." I stared at her, completely baffled by the sheer audacity. She had been employed for less than 72 hours and was already attempting to delegate her entry-level tasks back to the senior director who had hired her. I immediately shut the behavior down. I kept my posture relaxed, my facial expression neutral, and my tone completely professional. I handed the files back to her and stated clearly that understanding the manual data input was a mandatory requirement of her role, and that big picture strategy was above her current pay grade. I did not yell. I did not raise my voice. I did not use a single unprofessional word. But Lauren's reaction was a masterclass in weaponized fragility. The moment I held my boundary, her blue eyes welled up with immediate thick tears. Her lower lip trembled. She shrank back as if I had physically struck her, clutching the folder to her chest like a protective shield. Without saying a word, she turned and sprinted out of my office, rushing straight to the executive washroom to loudly sob. Within 45 minutes, my desk phone rang. It was Calvin. He asked me to step into his office, closing the door behind me with a look of deep concern. Lauren had bypassed her manager and gone straight to the chief executive officer. She had used her tears to paint a vivid, entirely fabricated picture of a hostile work environment. She told Calvin that I was being aggressive, short-tempered, and unapproachable. She played the eager, delicate new hire being bullied by the intimidating, angry black woman. And Calvin bought it completely. He sat me down and gently reprimanded me, suggesting that I needed to soften my management style to accommodate different corporate personalities. He told me to go easy on her, to remember that she was family, and to give her space to find her footing. I walked out of his office that day with a sick feeling in the pit of my stomach. The seeds of her entitlement were sown on day one, watered by my mother's enabling and fertilized by Calvin's implicit bias. She learned immediately that she did not have to outwork me to win. She just had to outplay me. I ignored the bitter harvest growing in my own department until the weeds eventually choked my career. But as I sit in my car, now turning off the ignition, a slow, genuine smile spreads across my face. Lauren successfully weaponized her fragility to steal my title, but stealing the farmer's title does not magically teach you how to grow the crops. The Trojan horse is finally inside the castle, but the soldiers inside the wooden belly have absolutely no weapons, no map, and no idea how to survive the impending siege. I step out of my car and walk through the front door of my home, tossing my keys onto the entryway table. The quiet of my living room gives me the space to truly process the sheer audacity of the last 8 months. If you want to understand how a junior coordinator leaps over a senior director to claim a vice president title in under a year, you have to look at the anatomy of corporate sabotage. Lauren did not climb the corporate ladder. She stood on my back and let Calvin pull her up. It started subtly. After the crying incident during her first week, Lauren realized that actual logistical work was too difficult. The spreadsheets, the supply chain metrics, the late-night vendor negotiations, it was all too gritty for her. So she pivoted to the only skill she actually learned during her expensive business degree. She mastered the art of corporate theft wrapped in a bright, palatable smile. Every Thursday morning, I hosted a mandatory operational strategy meeting for my department. I would stand at the front of the conference room, marker in hand, mapping out complex logistical routes on the whiteboard. I had been developing a predictive weather and fuel cost algorithm designed to reroute our long-haul trucks in real time. It was a massive undertaking, a piece of coding and strategic architecture that would ultimately save Apex Logistics millions of dollars a quarter and make us highly attractive to the European market. Lauren would sit in the corner of the room during these meetings, her legs crossed perfectly furiously, typing away on her tablet. At first, I genuinely thought she was taking diligent notes to learn the industry. She would raise her hand and ask innocent, probing questions. She would say things like, "Zuri, could you break down the fuel cost matrix one more time?" I really want to make sure I am grasping the foundational data for my notes. I would explain it clearly and concisely, pouring my expertise directly into her lap. I was not mentoring her, I was writing her script. She would take my raw, hard data, strip away the technical jargon, and slap it onto a sleek, minimalist presentation with pastel colors and corporate buzzwords. Then she would invite Calvin to a brainstorming lunch at the country club, the exact same club where my brother Malik was trying to secure a membership with my credit card. Away from the office, away from my oversight, she would slide her tablet across the table and present my precise algorithms as her own brilliant late-night epiphanies. She did not call them routing algorithms. She rebranded them as synergy optimizations. She packaged my grueling, highly technical labor into bite-sized aesthetic presentations that made Calvin feel like a visionary for hiring her. I caught her red-handed during her third month. I was walking past the glass-walled executive boardroom and saw Lauren standing in front of Calvin and two regional directors. She was pointing to a projection on the screen. It was my fuel cost matrix. She had changed the font and added a title slide with her name on it, but the data, the architecture, and the predictive models were entirely mine. I watched Calvin nod enthusiastically, looking at her with an expression of absolute professional infatuation. I did not wait for the meeting to end. I walked back to my office, gathered my original time-stamped blueprints, and waited for Calvin to return to his desk. When I stepped into his office and dropped the proof right in front of him, I expected him to be outraged by her blatant plagiarism. I expected him to reprimand her for intellectual theft. Instead, Calvin leaned back in his chair, glanced at my blueprints, and sighed. He was not surprised. He already knew she was regurgitating my work. "Zuri, do not be so territorial," he said, completely dismissing the mountain of evidence sitting between us. "Lauren is just eager to contribute. You are an operational genius, we all know that. But you have to admit your data can be a little dense, a little aggressive for the board to digest. Lauren just took your raw numbers and gave them a narrative. She translates your technical language into a vision the investors can easily understand. It is a fantastic example of teamwork." I stood there completely stunned by the flawless execution of his gaslighting. Teamwork. That was the word he used to describe theft. He was paying me to be the brain, but he wanted Lauren to be the mouth. Calvin knew exactly what she was doing, but he preferred her packaging. He preferred the comfortable, non-threatening, polished white woman delivering the profitable news. My expertise was undeniable, but my physical presence, a confident, dark-skinned African-American woman who demanded excellence and accountability, made him uncomfortable. He wanted my results without having to give me the respect, the title, or the financial compensation that came with them. From that day forward, the dynamic was set in stone. Lauren became the company darling, the visionary who brought synergy to the logistics department. And Calvin became her biggest champion, happily allowing her to build a staircase out of my intellectual property. They thought they had designed the perfect corporate ecosystem, one where they could endlessly harvest my brilliance while keeping me locked in the back office. But they overlooked one massive fatal detail. When you steal the farmer's crops, you better make sure you actually own the land they grow on. And Calvin was about to find out exactly whose land his entire company was built upon. The isolation did not happen overnight. It was a slow, deliberate starvation of information. After Calvin made it clear that he was perfectly fine with Lauren playing dress-up with my hard work, they had to take the next logical step to protect her fragile facade. They had to cut me off from the audience. The upcoming European merger was the largest acquisition deal in the history of Apex Logistics. It was a deal that required scaling our routing matrix to handle international freight across 12 different time zones. I spent 3 solid months preparing the infrastructure for that scale. I mapped the compliance codes, integrated the international fuel tariffs, and built a flawless presentation meant for the overseas investors. But 2 weeks before the final contracts were supposed to be signed, I started noticing the silence. Usually my inbox was a battlefield of operational queries and investor vetting questions. Suddenly it went completely quiet. The frantic email threads about European supply chain integrations vanished. I was no longer being tagged in the calendar invites for the late afternoon strategy sessions. I found out exactly why on a rainy Thursday evening. I had stayed at the office past 7 to run a diagnostic test on our servers. The corporate floor was completely deserted, or so I thought. As I walked toward the break room to grab a bottle of water, I passed the executive boardroom. The door was cracked open just a few inches. The lights were dimmed, but I could clearly hear the hushed conspiratorial voices echoing down the quiet hallway. It was Calvin and Lauren. I stopped walking and stood perfectly still in the shadows. Lauren was speaking in that breathless, eager tone she always used when she was manipulating him. "Calvin, are you absolutely sure we are ready for the investor call on Tuesday? The technical data Zuri provided is just so extensive. I really do not want her jumping in and dominating the conversation with her engineering jargon. It completely ruins the synergy of my presentation." Calvin let out a soft chuckle. "Do not worry about Zuri," he said, his voice dripping with casual disrespect. "I am handling her. Just make sure you do not copy her on the revised investor slide decks. Actually, keep her off the external communication threads entirely moving forward. We need to keep the optics clean. The Europeans are flying in expecting to see a polished executive face running this expansion. If Zuri gets on those email threads, she is going to confuse the partners with all her back-end data. You are the visionary here, Lauren. Let Zuri manage the warehouse metrics." I stood there in the dark hallway, my blood running cold. Keep the optics clean. That was corporate code for keeping the black woman hidden in the basement while the white woman took the credit in the penthouse. They were not just stealing my work anymore. They were actively isolating me from my own operational infrastructure. I did not barge into the boardroom. I did not demand an explanation. I quietly turned around, walked back to my desk, and sat down at my computer. Since I was the one who built the company network from the ground up, I had back-end administrative access that Calvin did not even know how to monitor. I bypassed the security firewall and ran a quiet audit on Lauren's email server. What I found made my stomach turn. Lauren had created a shadow distribution list. Every single email, financial projection, and strategic update from the European investors was being routed directly to her and Calvin. They had systematically scrubbed my name from every single document. To the international partners, Zuri did not exist. To them, Lauren was the sole architect of the entire global routing network. Calvin and Lauren were building a wall around me. They wanted to ensure I had absolutely zero visibility with the new investors, locking me out of the very rooms my genius had unlocked. They thought if they kept me blind and isolated, I would eventually just accept my fate as the invisible backbone of their success. They thought they had successfully trapped me in a cage of my own making. But what they failed to realize is that when you lock the mechanic out of the garage, you also lock yourself inside with a machine you do not know how to operate. By cutting me out of those email threads, Calvin and Lauren handed me the greatest gift they possibly could. They gave me the gift of total deniability. They gave me the blind spot I needed to set the bomb. I log out of the administrative server, leaving absolutely zero trace of my digital audit. I pack my laptop into my bag, turn off the lights in my office, and walk out to the executive parking garage. The drive home is usually a stressful blur of mental checklists and operational anxieties, but tonight the gentle hum of my car engine sounds like a victory march. Calvin and Lauren truly believe they have outsmarted me. They believe they have successfully stolen my intellectual property by simply erasing my name from a few email chains and locking me out of boardroom meetings. What Calvin has conveniently forgotten, or perhaps never fully understood in the first place, is the foundational history of his own corporate empire. 5 years ago, Apex Logistics was not the industry titan it is today. It was a struggling, mid-sized firm, bleeding cash, and desperate for a lifeline. Calvin was trying to secure his first massive round of venture capital funding, but he could not afford the multi-million-dollar enterprise software required to scale our operations to a national level. The massive upfront cost of third-party logistics platforms was going to bankrupt him before he even got to the pitch meeting. He came into my office, sweating, pacing back and forth, begging me to find a digital workaround. I did not just find a workaround. I built the entire system from scratch. I spent 8 months coding a proprietary routing matrix, sacrificing my sleep, my weekends, and my personal life to build the exact infrastructure that saved Apex from going under. But even back then, as a younger Black woman navigating a corporate landscape designed to exploit my labor, I knew better than to hand over my genius for free to a man who loved taking all the credit. I knew my worth. Before I deployed a single line of code across the company servers, I quietly formed my own limited liability company. I named it Z-Suite Solutions. I paid a top-tier intellectual property lawyer to draft a rock-solid, ironclad licensing agreement. The contract explicitly stated that Apex Logistics did not own the software. They were merely leasing it from Z-Suite Solutions on an at-will basis. I brought the paperwork to Calvin on a chaotic Friday afternoon, right before a major holiday weekend. I casually placed it on his desk and told him it was standard compliance documentation for the new internal routing system. I told him IT needed his signature to push the final update live. Calvin was so desperate to get the system online and so thoroughly uninterested in the technical jargon he considered beneath his executive pay grade that he did not even read the first paragraph. He did not send it to legal. He just grabbed his expensive fountain pen, scrawled his signature on the dotted line, and handed it back to me with a dismissive wave. By signing that piece of paper, he legally bound his entire corporate infrastructure to my personal ownership. Apex Logistics does not own the code. They do not own the supply chain algorithms. They do not own the predictive weather modeling or the international fuel tariff integrations. I do. I own the servers. I own the administrative rights. I own every single data point that Lauren has pasted onto her pastel-colored slides to dazzle the European investors. Her entire upcoming presentation, the one that will determine the fate of the international merger, relies completely on live data calls to software that belongs exclusively to Z-Suite Solutions. I pull my car into my driveway and shift into park. I do not get out immediately. Instead, I sit in the quiet darkness of my car, reach into my purse and pull out my phone. I open a secure encrypted folder and tap on the digitized PDF of that licensing agreement. Calvin's rushed, messy signature sits right there at the bottom of the screen, frozen in time. It is a permanent monument to his own arrogant negligence. I scroll down to the termination clause, reading the beautiful legal phrasing that I have memorized by heart. The licensor reserves the right to revoke access to the proprietary software at any time, effective immediately upon written notice of resignation or contract termination. I lean my head back against the leather headrest and let out a deep, immensely satisfying breath. A genuine laugh escapes my lips, echoing in the quiet interior of my car. Calvin and Lauren spent the last 8 months plotting, scheming, and manipulating just to steal a vice president title. They can have it. A title is just a string of letters engraved on a piece of polished brass. It holds absolutely no real power. They successfully stole the title of the captain, but they are standing on a multi-million-dollar ship where I personally own the engine, the navigation system, and the anchor. And they have absolutely no keys to the ignition. I walk out of the executive suite and take the long hallway back to the operations floor. The fluorescent lights overhead hum a familiar, sterile tune. My heels click against the commercial carpet, carrying me away from Calvin, and the insulting $50 gift card I left sitting perfectly center on his mahogany desk. I do not feel angry. Anger is a hot, messy emotion that leads to mistakes. I feel something much more dangerous. I feel absolute crystalline clarity. I navigate through the maze of cubicles and open concept workspaces until I reach my office. It is the command center of Apex Logistics, filled with dual monitors displaying live thermal mapping and global freight tracking. I sit down in my ergonomic chair, resting my hands on my keyboard. For a fleeting moment, I just watch the data cascade across the screens. It is my life's work flowing in real time. I do not even get 2 full minutes of peace before I hear the unmistakable sound of her footsteps. It is a light, brisk clicking, accompanied by the cloying scent of a highly expensive floral perfume that she sprays way too heavily. Lauren strolls into my office without knocking. She is wearing a pristine pastel pink blazer that has never seen the inside of a warehouse, and holding a blank leather-bound notebook clutched to her chest. She closes the door behind her, ensuring we have privacy for her impending performance. She walks around my desk and stands right next to my chair. She takes a deep breath, arranging her features into a mask of perfectly manufactured, performative sympathy. It is the exact expression of a woman who just stole your wallet and wants to help you look for it. Lauren reaches out and places her hand squarely on my shoulder. The sheer, staggering condescension of that physical touch sends a shockwave of cold adrenaline straight down my spine. It is a calculated boundary violation. Yesterday, she would never have dared to touch me. Yesterday, she respected the invisible hierarchy of our department. But in the last 30 minutes, Calvin handed her an unearned crown, and that hand on my shoulder is her physically claiming her new territory. She is establishing dominance under the guise of sisterly affection. Zuri, she says, her voice dripping with a sickly, sweet, breathy tone. I just got off a private call with Calvin. He told me about the new organizational structure. I just want to say how much I respect you, and I really hope we can still be a team. I do not shrug her hand off my shoulder. I do not flinch. I keep my hands resting lightly on my keyboard and look up at her, waiting for the inevitable punchline. I know Lauren better than she knows herself. She did not come in here to offer condolences. She came in here to collect her prize. I am going to need you to train me on the routing matrix this afternoon. She continues, giving my shoulder a gentle, patronizing squeeze. I have to brief the European investors tomorrow morning at 9. I need you to walk me through the international fuel tariff integrations and show me how to override the automated vendor compliance codes. Just a quick crash course so I can answer their questions during the merger presentation. The silence in my office becomes so heavy it feels like it has a gravitational pull. I stare into her wide, expectant blue eyes, completely mesmerized by the absolute towering audacity of her request. She is standing in my office, having just leapfrogged over me to claim a vice president title she did not earn, and she is casually asking me to do her homework. She wants me to take 7 years of grinding operational labor, sleepless nights of coding, and complex supply chain architecture and condense it into a neat, digestible afternoon tutoring session. She expects me to package my own genius into bite-sized flashcards so she can stand in front of a room full of international billionaires tomorrow and flawlessly cosplay as an executive. The delusion is breathtaking. Lauren truly believes that the title on her new business card magically grants her the intellectual capacity to run a global logistics network. She does not even know what she does not know. She thinks my routing matrix is just a pretty spreadsheet that she can memorize overnight. She does not realize it is a living, breathing technological ecosystem that requires years of deep technical engineering to maintain. She thinks she can just grab the steering wheel of a high-speed bullet train and ask me to teach her how to drive it while we are already barreling down the tracks at 200 miles per hour. And the most infuriating part is that she fully expects me to say yes. She expects me to swallow my pride and do the heavy lifting because that is what I have always done. That is what my mother Valerie trained me to do. That is what my brother Malik relies on me to do. Lauren looks at me and sees the exact same dependable silent mule that the rest of my family sees. She thinks my loyalty to the company and my supposed loyalty to her as my sister-in-law will override my own self-respect. She assumes I will gladly hand over the ammunition she needs to shoot me in the foot. My mind races through the million different ways I could react. I could stand up, slap her hand off my shoulder, and scream until the glass walls shatter. I could expose her incompetence right here, right now, breaking down exactly how utterly useless her online Master of Business Administration degree is in the face of actual tangible logistics engineering. I could tear into her and lay bare every single ounce of resentment I harbor for how she and Calvin conspired to cut me out of the very deal I built. But I do not do any of those things. A loud, explosive reaction is exactly what she is waiting for. If I yell, she gets to run back to Calvin, weaponize her tears, and paint me as the bitter, hostile black woman who cannot handle corporate restructuring. If I show anger, I give her the power. Instead, I give her exactly what she asked for. I give her the illusion of compliance. I slowly turn my chair to face her fully. I look at her hand still resting presumptuously on my shoulder, and then I look back up into her eyes. I let a warm, highly convincing smile spread across my face. The kind of soft, reassuring smile you give to a child who is about to touch a hot stove. Of course, Lauren. I say, my voice smooth and perfectly even. We are absolutely still a team. I know how important this European merger is to Calvin and to your new role. I will get my notes organized and I will get right on it. Lauren beams, her face lighting up with genuine oblivious relief. She drops her hand from my shoulder and claps her notebook against her chest. Oh, thank you, Zuri. You are a lifesaver. I knew you would understand. Just email me the access codes and the data summaries before you leave today. We are going to crush this presentation tomorrow. She turns and saunters out of my office, her heels clicking merrily down the hallway as she heads back to the executive suite to undoubtedly celebrate her easy victory. I watch her walk away through the glass walls of my office. My smile does not falter until she turns the corner and disappears from sight. As soon as she is gone, the warmth drops from my face, leaving behind a mask of cold surgical precision. She wants the access codes. She wants the data summaries. She wants me to hand over the keys to my kingdom so she can lock me out forever. I turn back to my computer monitors. The live data is still cascading across the screens, tracking thousands of freight trucks moving across the globe, all orchestrated by the software I legally own under my personal limited liability company. Lauren thinks I'm going to spend my afternoon building her a bridge to the European investors. She has no idea that I'm about to detonate the entire infrastructure. I reach for my mouse, open a blank corporate email, and prepare to execute the most devastating departure in the history of Apex Logistics. The glass walls of my office offer a perfect unobstructed view of the operations floor. I watch the back of Lauren's pastel pink blazer disappear around the corner, heading straight toward the executive suites where she and Calvin will undoubtedly congratulate themselves on a seamless corporate coup. They think they have successfully pacified the workhorse. They think the transition is secured. I turn my chair back toward my command center. 3 large monitors dominate my desk, displaying the live pulsing data streams of Apex Logistics. Green dots track thousands of freight trucks moving across interstate highways. Red lines indicate international shipping routes syncing with overseas vendors. It is a beautiful, complex symphony of supply chain architecture, and I am the only conductor who knows how to read the sheet music. I place my hands flat on my keyboard. For 7 years, my hands have built, maintained, and salvaged this company. Every crisis, every delayed shipment, every vendor dispute ended right here at this desk. I always fixed it. I always absorbed the stress. I reach for my mouse and begin closing the tabs. I do not save my progress. I do not back up my daily reports to the shared company drive. I just click the small exit icon on the top right corner of the screen. The live thermal mapping goes dark. The global freight tracker vanishes. The vendor compliance matrix disappears. One by one, I shut down the visual representation of my life's work until all 3 monitors display nothing but the default blank corporate desktop background. The silence in my digital workspace is deafening and incredibly liberating. Standard corporate protocol dictates that a departing executive provides a comprehensive transition plan. Calvin fully expects a 40-page document detailing every operational nuance of my department. He expects a 2-week schedule where I sit side by side with Lauren, patiently holding her hand while I teach her how to navigate the complexities of international freight tariffs. He expects me to uphold the unwritten rule that even in the face of profound disrespect, I must remain the consummate accommodating professional. He expects me to absorb the humiliation and prioritize the health of his company over my own dignity. I open my desk drawer and pull out my personal hard drive. I plug it into the USB port and transfer my personal financial documents, deleting any trace of my private life from the company hardware. I will not be drafting a transition plan. I will not be writing a single word of instruction for the woman who stole my title. I owe them absolutely nothing. I open my email client. The cursor blinks steadily against the stark white background of a new message. I type Calvin's email address into the recipient line. Then I add the Director of Human Resources. I pause for a second, a smile playing at the corners of my mouth, and I add the head of the legal department to the copied list. If I'm going to drop a bomb, I want to make sure the blast radius reaches the people who are actually paid to clean up the wreckage. I move the cursor to the subject line. I do not write anything passive or polite. I do not write resignation or 2 weeks' notice. I type a single uncompromising phrase: immediate departure and license revocation. I click into the body of the email. My fingers hover over the keys. I could write a manifesto. I could detail every microaggression, every stolen presentation, and every instance of blatant disrespect I have endured over the last 7 years. I could explain exactly why Lauren is unfit for the role, and why Calvin is a coward for hiding behind her white fragility. But explaining myself requires emotional labor, and I have officially stopped providing free labor to Apex Logistics. Anger requires too much energy. Precision is much more lethal. I type the first sentence. Effective immediately, I resign from my position as Senior Director of Operations at Apex Logistics. It is crisp. It is clean. It leaves absolutely zero room for negotiation or a counteroffer. But the first sentence is just the formal severance of my employment. The second sentence is the kill switch. I take a deep breath, thinking about that licensing contract Calvin signed 5 years ago without reading a single word. I think about my personal company, Z Suite Solutions. I think about the European investors waking up tomorrow morning expecting a flawless demonstration of the proprietary routing technology that Calvin does not actually own. I type the second sentence. Furthermore, my personal software license for the core routing matrix, legally held under Z Suite Solutions, is officially revoked as of 5 p.m. today. I stare at those 2 sentences. That is the entire email. No thank you for the opportunity. No wishing the company well in its future endeavors. Just a clean surgical extraction and a timed detonation. Setting the revocation for 5 o'clock is a deliberate tactical choice. It gives me enough time to walk out of the building without the alarms sounding immediately. It ensures that the system will run normally for exactly the remainder of the business day, lulling Calvin and Lauren into a false sense of security. But the moment the clock strikes 5, the servers will automatically lock. The vendor matrix will shut down. The predictive routing algorithms will encrypt themselves, and every single truck in the Apex network will lose its automated dispatch instructions. The entire central nervous system of the company will instantly paralyze. I move my mouse to the send button. I do not hesitate. I do not second-guess my worth. I press the button. The email swishes out of my outbox. A profound physical wave of relief washes over me. The tension that has lived in my neck and shoulders for the better part of a decade simply evaporates. I sit back in my chair and let out a long, steady exhale. It is done. The invisible chains are broken. I stand up and move toward the small closet in the corner of my office. I pull out a single medium-sized cardboard box that I had folded flat and tucked away days ago when the competing job offer first came through. I set the box on my desk and begin the swift process of erasure. I am highly selective about what goes into the box. I pack the framed photograph of my late grandmother, the woman who taught me the value of hard work and the importance of never letting anyone diminish my light. I pack my personalized ergonomic mouse. I grab the expensive fountain pen I bought for myself when I closed my first major vendor account. I take my favorite coffee mug. Everything else stays. I leave the employee of the month glass plaques gathering dust on the shelf. I leave the corporate branded notebooks, the stress balls, and the company lanyards. I leave the binders full of printed logistical flowcharts. None of it matters anymore. It is just the debris of a corporate carcass. I place my purse on top of my personal items inside the box. I log out of the desktop computer one final time, leaving the screen completely blank. The office already looks foreign to me, as if it belongs to someone I used to know. I do not feel sad. I feel powerful. I pick up the box, the weight of it surprisingly light in my arms. I turn toward the glass door, ready to make my final walk down the executive hallway. I step out of my office holding the cardboard box perfectly leveled against my hip. The familiar hum of the operations floor surrounds me for the last time. Analysts are tapping away at their keyboards, and coordinators are speaking softly into their headsets, completely oblivious to the fact that the entire digital floor beneath them is about to collapse in a matter of hours. I walk past the rows of cubicles with a steady and measured pace. I do not look back. I do not feel an ounce of hesitation. I feel the profound lightness of a woman who has finally set down a burden she was never meant to carry alone. As I transition from the carpeted operations floor to the polished hardwood of the executive hallway, the atmosphere shifts. The air here is always a little colder, heavily filtered, and smelling faintly of expensive cologne and freshly printed legal documents. I pass by the glass-walled conference rooms where I spent years bleeding my expertise into dry erase boards. I walk past the framed mission statements on the walls, words about integrity and innovation that this company abandoned the moment it became convenient. I keep my eyes focused straight ahead, fixed entirely on the brushed steel doors of the elevator bank at the end of the corridor. I press the glowing down button. The chime echoes softly in the quiet space. I watch the floor indicator light begin its slow descent from the penthouse level. I adjust the box in my arms, catching my reflection in the polished metal of the elevator doors. The woman looking back at me is radiant. The heavy exhaustion that has shadowed my eyes for years is completely gone. I look like a woman who just bought her life back. The elevator arrives with a gentle ping. The metal doors slide open to reveal an empty car. I step inside, turn around, and reach out to press the lobby button. Just as my finger grazes the panel, the heavy, solid oak door of the executive suite violently slams open at the far end of the hallway. The sound echoes like a gunshot across the quiet floor. Zuri. Calvin's voice rips through the corridor. It is not his usual smooth and commanding baritone. It is a high and desperate shout. It is the sound of a man who just realized he stepped on a landmine and heard the click. I keep my hand resting near the control panel inside the elevator car and watch as the chief executive officer of Apex Logistics sprints down the executive hallway. Calvin is a man who prides himself on moving with deliberate and unbothered grace. He is a man who never runs. But right now, his expensive tailored suit jacket is flying open, his silk tie is flapping over his shoulder, and his face is completely drained of color. He is holding his smartphone in his hand, gripping it so tightly his knuckles are stark white. He had read the email. He had read the second sentence. He closes the distance between us, his leather dress shoes slipping slightly on the polished hardwood as he skids to a halt just outside the elevator doors. He is breathing heavily, his chest heaving, his eyes wide with an absolute and unadulterated panic that I have never seen him display in 7 years of working together. "Zuri, you cannot do this," Calvin gasps, holding up his phone as if I need to see the email I just wrote. "You cannot just leave. What are you talking about, a software license revocation? What is Z Suite Solutions?" I stand perfectly still inside the elevator car. I do not step forward. I do not raise my voice. I look at him with the calm and detached interest of someone observing a stranger. Z Suite Solutions is the limited liability company that owns the routing matrix your entire supply chain runs on. I say my voice smooth and perfectly even. It is the company written on the licensing agreement you signed 5 years ago without reading. Apex Logistics does not own the code Calvin. I do, and I am taking it with me. Calvin stares at me, his mouth opening and closing as the reality of his own arrogant negligence finally crashes down on him. The blood rushes back into his face, turning his cheeks a mottled and panicked red. He takes a half step toward the elevator, raising his hand in a placating and desperate gesture. Zuri, wait, let us talk about this. He pleads, his voice cracking. You're upset about the promotion. I get it. I understand. We can fix this right now. We can make you a co-vice president. We can double your salary. Just come back to my office. You cannot lock the software. The European investors are flying in tonight. The final merger presentation is tomorrow morning. If the routing matrix goes dark at 5 o'clock, the cargo trucks stop moving. We will lose the merger. The company will lose hundreds of millions of dollars. He is begging. The man who sat in his office 20 minutes ago and told me I lacked the executive presence to sit at his table is now standing in a hallway, sweating through his designer shirt, begging me to save his empire. He is offering me empty titles and hollow money, completely failing to understand that my dignity is not for sale. He chose the aesthetic over the architect. Now he gets to live in the house he built. I look at Calvin, watching the sheer terror dilating his pupils. I feel absolutely nothing for him. No pity, no remorse, just the cold and clean satisfaction of a perfectly executed departure. The elevator chimes a final warning, signaling that the doors are about to close. Zuri, please, Calvin shouts, stepping forward frantically, reaching his hand toward the closing gap between the metal doors. What am I supposed to do? The software is going to lock. What about the merger? I do not reach out to hold the doors. I do not flinch as the brushed steel panels begin to slide together, cutting off his desperate approach. I look him dead in the eye, my face breaking into a bright, flawless, and victorious smile. Lauren has a Master of Business Administration, I say, my voice ringing clear and steady through the narrowing gap. She will figure it out. The heavy metal doors slide shut with a solid and definitive thud, slicing off the sound of Calvin shouting my name. The elevator engages, pulling me smoothly downward toward the lobby, toward the street, and toward a future that belongs entirely to me. I stand alone in the quiet and descending car, holding my single box of personal belongings. I did not just cancel my transition notice. I canceled their entire future. I walk out of the building and step into the warm and bright afternoon sun, completely untouchable. The drive away from the corporate park is the most liberated I have felt in my entire adult life. I roll the windows down and let the warm Atlanta breeze fill the cabin of my car. For the first time in 7 years, I am not racing against a ticking clock to put out a logistics fire. I am just driving. I pull into the driveway of my home. It is a stunning modern property, nestled in a quiet, affluent neighborhood. I bought this house with the bonuses I negotiated through sheer, undeniable performance. It is my sanctuary, a physical manifestation of my brilliance. I unlock the front door and step inside the heavy oak door, closing with a satisfying final click. I set the single cardboard box of my belongings down on the entryway console. I do not look back at it. That part of my life is officially archived. I walk straight into my pristine, open-concept kitchen. I walk over to my custom wine fridge and scan the illuminated shelves. I bypass the everyday bottles and reach for a vintage Cabernet Sauvignon I have been saving for a momentous occasion. Today is unequivocally that occasion. I pull the cork, pour a generous measure into a crystal glass, and watch the deep ruby liquid swirl. I reach into my pocket and pull out my smartphone. The screen is already coming alive. The notifications are stacking up at an alarming rate. A text from Calvin, a missed call from the head of human resources, 2 missed calls from the lead IT director, who has undoubtedly just been informed that he cannot bypass my personal limited liability company's encryption protocols. And then a frantic text from Lauren begging me to answer the phone because the European investors have requested an early preliminary data review. I do not read the messages. I do not listen to the voicemails. I look at the digital clock at the top of my screen. It reads 4:30 in the afternoon. They have exactly 30 minutes of borrowed time remaining. I take a sip of the wine, savoring the rich, complex flavors. Then, with a slow and deliberate swipe of my thumb, I activate the Do Not Disturb feature. I watch the small crescent moon icon appear at the top of the screen. All the frantic buzzing, chiming, and vibrating instantly ceases. The digital umbilical cord is severed. I place the silenced phone face down on the kitchen island and walk upstairs to my master suite. My bathroom is a spa-like retreat designed specifically to wash away the grueling hours of corporate labor. I turn on the brass fixtures, letting the massive soaking tub fill with steaming hot water. I pour in a generous amount of expensive lavender-infused bath salts. As the room fills with fragrant steam, I systematically strip off my corporate armor. I take off the tailored blazer, the silk blouse, and the restrictive pencil skirt. I am shedding the uniform of the accommodating, hard-working black woman they so desperately wanted to keep contained. I step into the tub and sink down into the scalding water. The heat immediately seeps into my muscles, melting away the residual tension in my shoulders and lower back. I rest my head against the cool rim of the tub, close my eyes, and take another slow sip of the Cabernet. The absolute serenity of my house wraps around me like a heavy protective blanket. I open my eyes and look at the waterproof clock resting on my vanity. It is 4:58. I can visualize the exact sequence of events unfolding across town in the glass-walled executive suites of Apex Logistics. Right now, Calvin is sweating through his designer suit, pacing the floor of his office, screaming at the IT department over the speakerphone. Lauren is sitting at her stolen desk, staring at the routing matrix, completely paralyzed by her own incompetence. They are waiting for a miracle. They are waiting for the workhorse to feel guilty and turn the system back on. The clock ticks to 4:59. I imagine the massive digital displays on the operations floor, the green dots tracking the freight trucks, the red lines mapping the international cargo ships. I imagine the steady, synchronized pulse of the global supply chain that I built with my bare hands. The clock strikes 5 o'clock. A slow, genuine smile spreads across my face. I sink a little deeper into the fragrant hot water. Right at this very second, the kill switch engages. The screens across the entire Apex Logistics operations floor go completely black. The live tracking halts. The vendor matrix encrypts. The automated dispatch instructions instantly evaporate into the digital void. Every single truck driver, cargo pilot, and warehouse manager in the global network just lost their navigation. The system is dead. The beautiful, visceral contrast between the absolute tranquility of my bathwater and the catastrophic corporate inferno burning down across town is intoxicating. Calvin chose a fragile aesthetic over functional brilliance. He wanted a pretty face to present the data, completely forgetting that he needed a mastermind to generate it. Now he gets to stand in front of his wealthy European investors tomorrow morning with a blank screen, a paralyzed supply chain, and a vice president who does not even know the password to log into the servers. I do not feel an ounce of guilt. I do not feel worry. I close my eyes, take another sip of my wine, and let the soothing quiet of my evening wash over me. I am going to enjoy this bath. I am going to order an extravagant dinner. I am going to sleep a solid, uninterrupted 8 hours. Because tomorrow the ashes of their empire will be waiting for me, and I want to be well rested for the show. I open my eyes to a bedroom flooded with brilliant and unfiltered midday sunlight. The digital clock resting on my nightstand reads 12:15 in the afternoon. For the first time in 7 grueling years, I did not jolt awake at 4 in the morning to the sound of a blaring corporate alarm. I stretch my arms high above my head, feeling the soft and expensive thread count of my sheets against my skin. There is no tightness in my jaw. There is no dull and throbbing headache of impending logistical disasters. I feel utterly, completely, and unapologetically rejuvenated. I take my time getting out of bed. I walk downstairs to my kitchen, the exact same kitchen where I left my silenced smartphone lying face down on the marble island the night before. I do not immediately reach for the device. Instead, I grind fresh coffee beans. I brew a rich and dark roast. I plate a beautiful, unhurried breakfast. I sit at my island, savoring the profound silence of my own home, eating in absolute peace. I am treating my morning with the deep respect and luxury I have been denying myself for almost a decade. Only when my coffee cup is entirely empty do I finally reach across the cool marble counter and pick up the phone. The screen is black dormant from hours of inactivity. I press the side button, unlock the screen, and swipe down to the control center. With a single and deliberate tap of my index finger, I disable the Do Not Disturb feature. The reaction is instantaneous and violent. The phone practically seizes in my hand. The processor completely freezes as it attempts to catch up with a massive and unprecedented backlog of data. The device vibrates so fiercely and continuously that it sounds like a small motor running on my countertop. The notifications flood the screen in a rapid and overlapping waterfall of sheer, unadulterated panic. When the software finally stabilizes enough for me to read the display, the numbers are staggering. I have exactly 85 missed calls. I have 142 unread emails in my inbox. The text message icon displays a bright red bubble indicating dozens upon dozens of frantic, desperate messages. The sheer volume of terror trapped inside this small glass rectangle is a masterpiece. I do not read the long paragraphs of text just yet. I tap the phone icon and navigate directly to my voicemail inbox. I want to hear the exact tone and cadence of their suffering. I press play on the very first message recorded this morning. The timestamp reads 8 o'clock exactly. This is the precise hour the corporate offices officially open. The audio clicks, and Lauren's voice fills my quiet kitchen. She sounds breathless, her tone a chaotic mixture of forced corporate cheerfulness and creeping high-pitched terror. "Zuri, hey, it is Lauren." She pauses, and I can hear the rapid and frantic clicking of a keyboard in the background. "So I am sitting here in your old office and the routing matrix seems to be locked. It is asking for a master decryption password that is not in the company directory. The European investors are logging onto the conference call in an hour, and I really need to pull up the live data sets. Could you just shoot me a quick text with the master password? Thank you so much, you are a total lifesaver. Call me back." The line clicks dead. I take a slow sip of my ice water, marveling at the boundless depths of her delusion. Lauren truly believes this is just a minor technical glitch. She thinks my proprietary, legally protected software license revocation is just a forgotten password. She genuinely expects me, the black woman she leapfrogged and discarded yesterday, to answer my phone on my first morning of unemployment and cheerfully hand over the keys to the castle so she can impress a room full of international billionaires. She has absolutely no comprehension of the fact that I own the digital building she is currently standing in. She believes her white fragility and her shiny business degree will magically compel the software to bend to her will. I swipe past several more missed calls, skipping the escalating panic of the 9 o'clock hour, and select a voicemail time-stamped at 10:30 in the morning. This is exactly 30 minutes after the European investor meeting officially started. The audio connects and Calvin's voice booms through the speaker. He is trying desperately to sound authoritative, to project the aura of an untouchable chief executive officer holding the reins of a global empire. But the deep, trembling tremor in his chest completely betrays him. "Zuri, this is Calvin." His voice is tight-clipped and heavy with suppressed rage. "I do not know what kind of stunt you think you are pulling, but this is highly unprofessional. You cannot just lock company software and walk away. You are in direct violation of corporate policy. I need you to turn the routing matrix back on immediately. Do you hear me? Immediately. Or else I will have the legal department involve the authorities for corporate sabotage. We are in the middle of a major presentation, and you are jeopardizing this entire firm. Turn it on." The message abruptly ends. I set the phone back down on the marble island and laugh out loud. The sound echoes freely in my spacious kitchen. Or else. Or else what, Calvin? I am not in violation of any corporate policy because I do not work for your corporation anymore. And I did not sabotage your software. I simply took my legally owned property and went home exactly as outlined in the ironclad licensing agreement you signed with your own hand 5 years ago. His threat of legal action is hilariously empty. I can guarantee that right before he made this phone call, he yelled at his corporate lawyers to sue me, and those lawyers had to nervously explain to him that he does not have a single leg to stand on. I can picture him perfectly. He is standing at the head of the executive boardroom table, sweating through his custom-tailored suit in front of the European investors. He is staring at a massive blank projection screen, completely unable to explain why his company cannot track a single cargo truck in his global fleet. His fake authority is crumbling in real time. His empty threats are nothing but the dying gasps of an arrogant man who just realized he brought a paper sword to a gunfight. I scroll past a dozen more frantic missed calls from Human Resources and the IT department. By early afternoon, the tone of the voicemails shifts from arrogant demands to absolute unfiltered despair. They have passed the anger stage of corporate grief and plunged headfirst into the bargaining phase. I select a message time-stamped at 1:15 in the afternoon. The audio crackles to life and I immediately hear the sound of hyperventilating. It is Lauren. She is full-blown sobbing, her breath catching in her throat, the polished, confident country club aesthetic completely shattered. "Zuri, please. Please pick up the phone," she begs, her voice dissolving into a wet, hiccuping cry. The Europeans walked out. They walked out of the boardroom. I could not answer their questions about the international fuel tariffs. And the screens went black, and the investors told Calvin that we are a liability. Zuri, the cargo trucks are stranded globally. The dispatch centers in London and Tokyo are calling my personal cell phone, and the drivers cannot cross the borders without the automated compliance codes. Calvin is screaming at me. I do not know what to do. I do not know how to fix this. Please, I will give you the title back. Just turn the routing matrix back on, please. The message cuts off with a sharp gasp. I stare at my phone, my expression entirely impassive. I feel a fleeting microscopic ounce of pity for her, but it is instantly washed away by the harsh truth of accountability. Lauren wanted to sit in the captain's chair. She wanted the status and the salary without doing the grueling invisible labor required to actually steer the ship. Now the ship is sinking to the bottom of the ocean, and she is crying because the water is cold. I am not throwing her a life jacket. She stole my blueprint so she can figure out how to build her own raft. I tap the screen one final time to play the very last voicemail. It is time-stamped at 3:45 in the afternoon. The European markets have officially closed. The daily freight deadlines have passed. The damage is irreversible. The voice on the line is Calvin. The booming authoritative chief executive officer from yesterday morning is completely gone. In his place is a man who sounds physically hollowed out. His voice is a low, defeated whisper. Zuri. He breathes heavily into the receiver. I spoke to legal. I know about Z-Suite Solutions. I know what you did. He pauses, and the silence on the line is heavy with the weight of a multi-million-dollar collapse. We are bleeding millions by the hour, Zuri. We lost the European merger. The board of directors is demanding an emergency meeting tonight, and I do not have any answers for them. I was wrong. I was arrogant, and I was wrong. I am asking you to come back. Name your price. Whatever you want. Double your salary. A co-vice president title. Equity shares in the company. I will write you a blank check right now. Just tell me what it takes to bring you back and turn the software on, please. I listen to the dial tone echo in my quiet kitchen. A blank check. 3 years ago, I would have killed for that kind of recognition. I would have bent over backward to accept his apology and rushed back to the office to save his company. I would have let my loyalty to a Black-owned business override my own self-respect. But that version of Zuri died in his corner office yesterday morning. I do not feel the need to call him back and gloat. I do not need to hear him apologize or grovel in real time. My silence is infinitely more powerful than any words I could possibly say to him. I swipe my thumb across the screen, select the entire list of voicemails, and tap delete. The audio files vanish into the digital trash bin, permanently erasing Calvin and Lauren from my professional life. I exit the voicemail application and open my personal email inbox. Waiting right at the top is a secure encrypted message from the recruitment team at Global Vanguard. They are the largest, most formidable logistics rival in the country. They are the very company Calvin has spent the last 5 years desperately trying to outmaneuver. I open the email and click the attached digital contract. The document loads flawlessly on my screen. I read the bold, clean text at the top of the first page. It is an official offer for the position of Executive Vice President of Global Operations. The compensation package is astronomical, complete with stock options, a massive signing bonus, and a dedicated team of junior engineers who will answer directly to me. But the most beautiful part of the contract is nestled in the intellectual property clauses. Global Vanguard is not just hiring me. They are formally leasing the routing matrix from Z Suite Solutions for an incredibly lucrative annual fee. They know my worth, and they are paying top dollar for both the architect and the architecture. I scroll to the bottom of the final page. I tap the signature box. Using my fingertip, I sign my name with a smooth, decisive flourish. I hit submit. The screen flashes a bright green checkmark, confirming the contract is legally binding and fully executed. It is officially done. I just became the highest-ranking operations executive at Apex's biggest competitor, and I am bringing my flawless proprietary routing software with me. I lock my phone, set it back down on the marble counter, and take a final sip of my coffee. The corporate bloodbath across town is no longer my concern. I am already building my new empire. But my moment of absolute victory is abruptly interrupted by the shrill, aggressive, and relentless ringing of my front doorbell. The chime of my doorbell does not just ring. It is violently assaulted. Someone is laying their entire body weight on the button, accompanied by the heavy, frantic pounding of fists against my custom mahogany front door. The aggressive noise shatters the absolute peace of my evening. I do not rush. I take a slow, centering breath, smooth down the fabric of my silk loungewear, and walk deliberately from the kitchen to the foyer. I glance at the security camera monitor mounted on the wall. Standing on my front porch is a trio of pure, unadulterated chaos. I unlock the deadbolt and pull the heavy door open. They do not wait for an invitation. They push past me, invading the sanctity of my home with the destructive, entitled force of a hurricane. My mother, Valerie, leads the charge. She is wearing her immaculate Sunday church attire on a weekday evening, wielding her respectability like a weapon. Right behind her is my older brother Malik, puffing his chest out and rolling his shoulders to appear physically intimidating, though he is currently standing in my foyer wearing designer sneakers that I paid for. And trailing behind them, practically hiding in the protective shadow of my brother, is Lauren. The freshly minted vice president of international operations looks like a complete disaster. Her pastel pink blazer is wrinkled and disheveled. The perfectly styled hair she sported yesterday morning is now a messy, chaotic knot. Her mascara is heavily smeared under her wide blue eyes, and she is taking shallow, dramatic gasps of air, clutching her chest as if she is struggling to breathe. Before I can even close my own front door, Valerie unleashes her fury. She plants her feet firmly in the center of my living room, points a perfectly manicured finger directly at my face, and begins screaming. "How could you do this to your sister-in-law?" Valerie's voice echoes off my high ceiling, sharp, piercing, and laced with absolute disgust. "Look at her, Zuri. She is having a full-blown panic attack because of you. You are just bitter and jealous because she got the promotion you wanted." I stand near the entryway, folding my arms across my chest, letting the sheer, staggering absurdity of her accusation wash over my skin. I look at my mother. The woman who gave birth to me is standing inside the house that I bought aggressively, defending the white woman who actively stole my intellectual property. Valerie is so deeply infected by her own internalized biases and her desperate need for high society validation that she cannot even see the reality of the situation right in front of her. To my mother, Lauren is the ultimate victim. Lauren is the fragile, innocent prize that needs protecting from the harsh realities of the corporate world. and I am the angry, hostile black daughter who is ruining the family's upward mobility out of sheer spite. Valerie genuinely believes that I should have smiled, bowed my head, and gladly handed over my life's work, just so Lauren could have a fancy title to brag about at the country club. She expects me to absorb corporate abuse simply because the abuser is married to her golden boy. I do not raise my voice. I do not match her hysterical energy. I just stare at her, my silence acting as a mirror reflecting her own toxicity right back at her. Lauren uses the silence to escalate her performance. She lets out a loud theatrical sob, burying her face into the fabric of Malik's shirt. I tried to be nice to her. Malik Loren cries, her voice trembling with perfectly weaponized tears. I offered to let her stay on my team. I asked her nicely for the routing password so I could do my job, and she just locked everything down and walked out. She hates me. I do not know what I did to make her hate me so much. It is a masterclass in manipulation. If I did not know for a fact that she spent the last 8 months ruthlessly plagiarizing my operational algorithms and actively conspiring with Calvin to erase my name from corporate documents, I might actually feel a sliver of sympathy for her. She plays the role of the bullied, overwhelmed new hire with terrifying accuracy. She knows exactly how to trigger the protective instincts of the people around her, spinning a narrative where her profound incompetence is somehow framed as my malicious sabotage. Valerie steps closer to me, her eyes flashing with a righteous, misplaced anger. You are going to fix this, Zuri. You are going to sit down at your computer right now, and you are going to give Lauren whatever access codes she needs to save her job. You are embarrassing this family. You are embarrassing your brother. Malik finally secured a woman of grace and standing, and you are trying to destroy their marriage because you cannot handle your own professional failures. The words hang in the air, toxic and heavy. My professional failures. I am looking at a mother who is entirely comfortable rewriting reality to protect her son's fragile ecosystem. She completely ignores the fact that her son is a chronically unemployed 37-year-old man who relies on my bank account to survive. She completely ignores the fact that Lauren's grace did not stop her from committing corporate theft. In Valerie's mind, my relentless work ethic and my brilliant success are irrelevant because I refuse to be submissive. I look at the three of them standing in my beautiful, peaceful living room. They look like parasites who have finally realized the host organism has detached the feeding tube. They did not come here to check on me. They did not come here to ask why I abruptly resigned from a job I had dedicated 7 years to. They came here to demand that I get back in my harness and keep pulling their carriage. Malik steps away from Lauren, his jaw clenched, taking a heavy step toward me. He is preparing to take the baton from our mother, ready to use his authority as the older brother to force me into compliance. He thinks he can bully me into logging onto my laptop and surrendering the intellectual property I built with my own hands. He has absolutely no idea that he is walking directly into a trap that will fundamentally dismantle his entire existence. Malik closes the distance between us until he is standing less than 2 feet away. He uses his height towering over me, trying to cast a shadow of physical intimidation that might have worked when we were children, but has absolutely no effect on the woman paying his bills. His face is twisted into an ugly snarl of misplaced entitlement. Get on your laptop right now and give Lauren the access codes, Malik demands, his voice a low and menacing growl. He points a finger toward my home office down the hall. Do you have any idea what you are doing to her career? Do you have any idea how bad you are making me look? You need to fix this right now. Be a team player for once in your life, Zuri. A team player. The phrase actually makes me chuckle softly, a dry sound that seems to infuriate him even more. You are messing with my future, Zuri, Malik adds, pointing his finger closer to my face. Lauren's new salary is supposed to fund our lifestyle while my business transitions. You are literally taking food out of my mouth because you are too stubborn to accept the corporate hierarchy. Just give her the administrative passwords. The profound irony of Malik claiming Lauren's salary pays for their lifestyle when my bank account has been their sole life support for years is a staggering display of cognitive dissonance. I look up at my brother, completely unbothered by his aggressive posturing. I am not ruining her career, Malik, I say, my voice eerily calm against his rising volume. Lauren does not have a career in logistics. She has a costume. She has a stolen title and a borrowed desk. I simply took my own property and left her to do the job she claimed she was so incredibly qualified for. If she is an executive, she should be able to execute. Lauren lets out another dramatic wail, stepping out from behind my brother's broad shoulders. She realizes that Malik's intimidation tactics are bouncing right off my armor, so she pivots back to the only strategy she has left: the absolute unadulterated weaponization of white female victimhood. Her face is flushed and she looks at me with a mixture of sheer panic and deep-seated resentment. I earned that promotion, Zuri. Lauren cries out, her voice pitching into a shrill and defensive shriek. I have the business degree. I bring actual vision to that company. Calvin gave me that title because the European board wanted someone they could relate to, someone who understands global synergy. You are just doing this out of pure spite because you are bitter. She takes a step forward, emboldened by my mother nodding along in agreement behind her. You have always been so intimidating and hostile to me, since my very first day. Lauren continues, the tears streaming down her face as she fully commits to her narrative. You are acting exactly like an angry, hostile black woman who cannot stand to see someone else succeed. You are trying to destroy my life because you are jealous of me and Malik. The silence that follows that statement is profound. The words angry, hostile black woman hang suspended in the air of my living room. She said the quiet part out loud. In her absolute desperation, the thin veneer of her polished country club etiquette completely melts away, exposing the raw and ugly racial bias she and Calvin used to justify stealing my labor. She genuinely believes her existence is inherently more valuable than my expertise. She thinks her vision, which consisted entirely of copying my data onto pastel slides, makes her a superior corporate asset. My mother Valerie does not correct her. My brother Malik does not defend me. They stand there in absolute solidarity with a woman who just hurled a racist trope directly at my face inside my own home. They are perfectly willing to sacrifice my humanity to protect her fragility. Lauren wipes her eyes with the back of her hand, taking a deep, shuddering breath. You need to log into the Matrix and transfer the administrative rights to me, right now, she demands, her voice dropping the crying act for just a fraction of a second, to reveal the cold entitlement underneath. It is the company software. You owe it to Calvin and you owe it to this family to hand it over. If you do not give me those codes for free tonight, Calvin is going to fire me tomorrow and my career will be over. I stand there in the center of my foyer and absorb the sheer astronomical audacity of their demand. They stormed into my sanctuary. They insulted my character. They threw deeply offensive stereotypes in my face. And after all of that, they are explicitly demanding that I hand over the intellectual property I spent 7 brutal years coding, engineering, and legally licensing under my own name. They want me to forfeit my multi-million-dollar asset entirely for free, simply to save Lauren from the humiliation of her own profound incompetence. They want me to sacrifice my empire so she does not have to feel embarrassed at work tomorrow. I look at my mother, whose arms are crossed in self-righteous expectation. I look at my brother, whose jaw is locked in aggressive entitlement. I look at Lauren, whose tear-stained face is a perfect mask of manipulative victimhood. They expect me to break. They expect the weight of family obligation and the fear of being labeled the angry black woman to force me into submission. They think I'm going to walk down the hall, open my laptop, and surrender everything I have ever worked for. I do not yell. I do not cry. I do not offer a single word in defense of my character because my character is not up for debate. I simply turn my back on them and walk slowly toward the sleek marble console table, sitting against the far wall of my living room. I reach out and pick up 2 thick, perfectly sealed manila folders that I prepared specifically for this exact moment. The time for talking is over. The time for execution has arrived. I turn around from the marble console table holding the 2 thick manila folders. The ambient lighting of my living room casts a soft and welcoming glow, but the atmosphere between us is absolute ice. I walk back toward the center of the room where my family is standing, like an invading army waiting for my surrender. I do not hand anything to my mother. I do not look at my brother. I step directly into Lauren's personal space and hold out the first folder. "Take it," I say, my voice dropping to a low and lethal register. Lauren hesitates. The fake tears instantly dry up, replaced by a genuine and creeping sense of dread. She reaches out with a trembling hand and takes the folder from my grip. She flips it open. She stares at the heavy legal paper inside, her eyes rapidly scanning the bold lettering at the top of the document. That is a formal cease and desist order combined with a preemptive legal injunction. I explain, stepping back and crossing my arms over my chest. My intellectual property attorneys filed it with the federal court this afternoon. It explicitly outlines that the routing matrix, the fuel algorithms, and the vendor compliance networks are the sole and exclusive property of Z Suite Solutions. Lauren looks up from the paper, her breath catching in her throat. "I do not understand what this means for me," she whispers. "It means," I say, enunciating every single syllable with crystal clarity, "that if you, Calvin, the IT department, or anyone currently employed by Apex Logistics, attempts to bypass my servers, hack the administrative portal, or reverse engineer a single line of my code, I will personally sue you into corporate bankruptcy. I will drag you and Calvin into federal court for intellectual property theft and corporate espionage. The damages will be in the hundreds of millions. You will not just lose your job, Lauren. You will lose your savings, your future, and any chance of ever working in the logistics industry again." Malik steps forward, his false bravado beginning to crack under the weight of actual legal consequences. "Zuri, you cannot do this to her," he says, his voice rising in panic. "She needs that software for the European investors tomorrow. If you do not give her the code, they will pull out of the merger, and she will be ruined." I let out a sharp and genuine laugh. The sound cuts through the tension in the room like a blade. "Oh, Malik, the European merger is already dead." Lauren drops the folder to her side. Her jaw goes slack. "What are you talking about?" she asks, her voice barely audible. I look her dead in the eye and deliver the final crushing blow to her stolen corporate dream. "You and Calvin spent 8 months plotting to keep me hidden because you thought the European investors only wanted to see a polished white woman at the head of the table. You thought proximity to whiteness and country club aesthetics were the real currency in this industry. But you forgot one massive foundational detail. The investors do not drive the trucks. The vendors do." I take a slow step closer to her, watching the panic completely consume her features. "While you were practicing your synergy presentations and trying to sound smart at expensive lunches, I was on the phone with the top 20 international freight vendors in our network. The people who actually move the cargo. The people who rely on my specific routing matrix to keep their profit margins intact. I have spent 7 years building ironclad relationships with them. They do not care about your business degree or Calvin's golf handicap. They care about operational efficiency." I let the silence hang for a split second before dropping the bombshell. At 3:45 this afternoon, I officially signed an electronic contract to become the new Executive Vice President of Global Operations at Global Vanguard. My mother gasps aloud. She covers her mouth with her hand. Global Vanguard is Apex Logistics' absolute biggest and most ruthless rival. It is the multi-billion-dollar company Calvin has spent his entire career trying to outmaneuver. Yes, I continue, watching the color completely drain from Lauren's face until she looks ghostly pale. I took the executive vice president title that I actually earned. I am taking my proprietary software with me. And the absolute best part is that all 20 of your top international vendors have already agreed to invoke the escape clauses in their contracts. They are transitioning their entire fleets over to Global Vanguard by the end of the month. They are following the architect Lauren. They are not following the aesthetic. Lauren staggers backward, bumping hard into Malik's chest. She looks like the floor has just opened up beneath her. She realizes the profound magnitude of her mistake. She did not just steal a promotion. She walked directly onto a sinking ship, and I just took all the lifeboats with me. "Calvin is not going to save your career tomorrow, Lauren," I say, my voice cold, steady, and absolute. When he stands in front of that blank screen and realizes his entire supply chain is transitioning to his biggest rival, he is going to need a scapegoat. He is going to need someone to fiercely blame for the catastrophic loss of his company. And he is going to look right at the junior coordinator he foolishly promoted to vice president. You wanted the executive spotlight so badly. Well, congratulations. You are about to be the face of the biggest corporate failure in logistics history. Lauren begins to hyperventilate for real this time. There are no fake tears. There is no weaponized fragility meant to manipulate my mother and brother. There is only the absolute undeniable terror of a woman who just realized her actions have permanent and devastating consequences. She looks at my brother frantically, shaking her head, completely unable to process the reality that her corporate costume has been entirely shredded. She is holding a piece of paper that guarantees her professional destruction. I do not offer her a single ounce of comfort. I do not soften my expression. I simply turn my attention away from her collapsing world and look directly at my brother. I hold up the second manila folder, feeling the satisfying weight of it in my hand. Lauren's receipt has been delivered in full, and now it is time for Malik to collect his. I step toward my brother and extend my arm. Malik looks down at the second manila folder in my hand. The false bravado he carried into my home has completely evaporated, replaced by a nervous, twitching energy. He reaches out and takes the folder, opening the cover with stiff fingers. He stares at the single sheet of paper inside. His brow furrows in genuine confusion as he tries to comprehend the legal jargon. What is this, Zuri? Malik asks, his voice losing all its aggressive volume. A 30-day notice to vacate. Why are you giving me an eviction notice from my property management company? I do not answer him directly. Instead, I turn my gaze to my mother. Valerie has been standing in the center of my living room, clutching her designer purse, watching Lauren's professional destruction with wide, horrified eyes. She is completely paralyzed. I lock eyes with the woman who spent my entire life minimizing my existence to inflate her son's ego. You know that beautiful 3-story brick townhouse Malik and Lauren live in? I say, my voice ringing clear and steady. The one with the vaulted ceilings and the chef's kitchen? The one you constantly brag about to your friends at church, telling them how well your golden boy is providing for his refined wife. Valerie swallows hard, refusing to break eye contact, but she nods slowly. They do not rent that property from a corporate management company. I continue stepping closer to her so she feels the absolute weight of my words. They rent it from me. I bought that townhouse 4 years ago through a blind trust. I am the landlord. And for the past 3 years, I have been secretly subsidizing 70% of their monthly rent just so they could afford to live there and pretend to be successful. The air leaves my mother's lungs in a sharp, audible gasp. Malik drops the folder onto the floor, staring at me as if I have just grown a second head. You own the townhouse, Malik stammers, looking wildly between me and the eviction notice on the floor. I own it. I confirm, not breaking my gaze with my mother. And since you two decided to bite the very hand that has been quietly feeding you for years, since you decided to march into my sanctuary and demand I surrender my intellectual property to save a woman who actively tried to destroy my career, the charity has officially expired. You have exactly 30 days to pack your things and get out of my property. The silence that descends upon my living room is absolute. The illusion of my family's hierarchy shatters into a million jagged pieces right there on my hardwood floor. For my entire life, they operated under the delusion that Malik was the royalty and I was the help. They thought they held the emotional high ground. But the cold, hard reality has finally breached the walls of their denial. They realize all at once that I hold all the power. I hold the money. I hold the real estate. I hold the intellectual property. I am the foundation they built their entire fake lives upon, and I am actively pulling the rug out from under them. Valerie opens her mouth to speak, perhaps to beg, perhaps to try and deploy the motherly guilt trips that worked so flawlessly when I was younger. But she looks at my face and stops. She sees the cold, impenetrable wall I have built. She knows the well is permanently dry. Get out of my house, I command, my voice low and absolute. Leave your keys on the console table and do not ever show up at my door uninvited again. They do not argue, they do not yell. The fight has been completely drained out of them. Lauren turns and shuffles toward the front door, still weeping silently into her hands, carrying the legal injunction that seals her professional doom. Malik follows her, his head hung low, stripped of every ounce of his unearned pride. My mother is the last to leave. She pauses at the threshold, looking back at me with an expression of profound, devastating loss. She did not just lose her financial safety net, she lost her punching bag. She walks out into the night, and I shut my heavy front door, locking the deadbolt with a solid, resounding click. 1 year later, the dust has completely settled. The corporate landscape looks entirely different. Apex Logistics did not survive the fallout. When Calvin stood in front of the European board the next morning with a paralyzed routing system and a vice president who could not answer a single technical question, the investors pulled their funding immediately. Without the international merger, and without the top 20 vendors who transitioned their fleets to my new company Apex, bled capital at an astronomical rate. They filed for corporate bankruptcy 8 months later. Calvin's reputation was destroyed, and Lauren was unceremoniously fired. The logistics industry is a very small, highly communicative world. Word spread rapidly about the junior coordinator who tried to steal proprietary software and sank an entire company in the process. Lauren is completely unemployable in the corporate sector. Without her inflated salary and after being evicted from my luxury townhouse, she and Malik had absolutely nowhere to go. They had to pack their belongings into boxes and move into Valerie's cramped, tiny guest room. From what I hear through the grapevine, the living situation is a miserable, suffocating nightmare for all three of them. Valerie finally gets to live with her golden boy and her refined daughter-in-law 24 hours a day, and she is paying the ultimate price for her enabling. As for me, I am sitting behind a massive polished desk in a top-floor corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. I am the executive vice president of global operations at Global Vanguard. The vendor routing matrix I built is running flawlessly across the globe, generating unprecedented revenue. My team respects my leadership, my brilliant mind is compensated with equity and a massive salary, and my home remains a peaceful, untouchable sanctuary. I successfully built my own empire the moment I realized my worth was not tied to their approval. I permanently cut off the toxic bloodline that tried to use me as their footstool. I stopped carrying their dead weight, and in return I learned exactly how high I could fly. The most powerful lesson from Zuri's journey is that your worth is never defined by those who are committed to misunderstanding and exploiting you. Whether in a toxic corporate environment or a manipulative family dynamic, staying loyal to people who only value your utility will ultimately destroy your spirit. Zuri teaches us that true empowerment comes from recognizing your own brilliance, setting uncompromising boundaries, and walking away from tables where you are no longer respected. You do not have to be the silent workhorse for someone else's unearned success. Reclaim your intellectual property, protect your peace, and build your own empire. Share your own story of reclaiming your power in the comments below, and hit that subscribe button for more empowering stories of resilience.